Right before the meeting starts, we're going to do a proclamation. The mayor's out of town, so he graciously allowed me to do the proclamation for Wyatt. Wyatt has worked the past couple of seasons as a lifeguard at the pool, so he's kind of one of my kids. So I got the privilege, really, to be able to read this and present this to him. Whereas on March 10th, 2024, Wyatt Hinton, a senior at Norwood High School, became the first boys wrestling state champion as he won the 2024 OHSAA Division III 138-pound wrestling state championship. And whereas Wyatt moved to Norwood in October of 2011, he started kindergarten in November of 11. His parents, Shannon and Liz, along with four brothers, are all big supporters of Wyatt. And whereas Wyatt started wrestling in 4th grade, while also playing baseball and Little Indians football, he moved exclusively to wrestling in his 8th grade. And whereas his most influential coaches are Derek and Tyler Awesome, along with Jermaine Lindsay. And whereas Wyatt is a 2-time sectional champion, 2-time district champion, 2-time MVC Most Valuable Wrestler, 2023 Coaches Classic Champion, and Most Outstanding Wrestler, 2023 OHSAA Division III 132-pound 6th place state placer, and 2024 OHSAA Division III 138-pound state champion. Now therefore I, Victor Schneider, not Victor, by virtue of authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Norwood, state of Ohio, do here proclaim March 26, 2024 as Wyatt Hinton Day in the city of Norwood.
Thanks, Gabby. I'm gonna get some water to go to the bathroom.
Thank you. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you can call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Here.
Mrs. Hoover?
Here.
Ms. Royce? Present. Mrs. Boland?
Here.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Here.
Mr. Girton?
Here.
Mr. Brady?
Here. All members present. Moving on to amendment of the agenda. We are going to remove the March 12th minutes. We are adding a resolution honoring Bridget Kelly, and I am recommending that we add that in the agenda to immediately follow the amendment of the agenda. Mrs. Hoover.
I move we amend the agenda as stated.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover to amend the agenda as stated. Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Francis.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Gerton.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Prior to consideration of the resolution honoring Ms. Kelly, we do have 3 requests to address council on that matter, and I will just go through in the order that they were received. Jan Michelle Lemon Kearney.
If it's permissible, the 3 of us would like to come up together. Is that okay?
That is fine.
Okay. And thank you for having us. We're really honored to be here with the City of Norwood City Council. Thank you so much. So I have with me, this is State Representative Dunny Isaacson, and this is City Council Member Anna Albee, and I'm Cincinnati Vice Mayor Jan Michelle Lemon Kearney. Since Dunny really is higher ranking, I'm going to allow him to take the microphone first. Out of respect.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm going to ignore that. Thanks for letting us speak on what is a sad topic, but something that means a lot to, I know, to a lot of people in this room and certainly to all of us, because they don't make public servants like they make Bridget Kelly. She is truly singular. And I'll just share a story that I shared recently elsewhere, which is that when I got to the legislature, I was very excited that I got assigned the same office as Bridget. And she left me her signature Kelly Green fridge in the office. And I kept it there. And so what that meant practically was that for the first year of meetings, people would come in, they'd look around, they'd see the fridge, they'd make the connection, and they'd go, oh, this was Rep. Kelly's office. And then it didn't matter if we had a 15-minute meeting or an hour-long meeting, they would spend the next 10 minutes telling me a story about Representative Kelly, about how she made them feel, about how kind she was, how effective she was, how she was their favorite rep, and there was no rhyme or reason to, I couldn't predict, oh, the Democrat is going to speak longer than a Republican, or a lobbyist is going to talk more than a nonprofit leader. Everyone had the same universal thought, which is that Bridget was someone they loved and they respected and they wanted to work with. And it has been a profound, just having the fridge in my office taught me a very profound lesson about what people value and how much and what they remember about working with people in those situations. And anyone who knows Bridget knows that she was very quick with a hug, very quick with a way too loud laugh. And it makes you feel that there's no artifice here. She's not putting on airs. She's just there to do the work for the community and the people that she cares about, many of whom are in this room. So thank you for giving us a few minutes to just celebrate a truly tremendous public servant.
I can't believe how young Bridget is. She's only 40 years old, and I've known her a long time. So when I first met Bridget, she was on Norwood City Council, and so then I realized, wow, she was actually elected to Norwood City Council right after she graduated from college. I mean, she was just out of Xavier University, and I didn't realize she was that young. I mean, she was so mature and so passionate, and really, fighting for rights for workers and for families. When she got into the State House, and we were so proud of her then, she fought for the pink tax, to keep feminine products from being taxed. And, she did all of her union work, but I really got to know her really well while she was on city council, because we started working for this unknown guy from Illinois that nobody thought had a chance of, making it anywhere, Barack Obama. And so she was part of our grassroots organizing campaign. And no one believed in us, no one believed in him, but we were out there working really hard. And she was just such a joy, just, you know, just such a kind, and she still is, just a kind person. And then I realized also when she was elected last year as Hamilton County Auditor, and we haven't really verified this, but I'm thinking she was probably the first woman elected as the Hamilton County Auditor. We try to go back, we went back to the 70s, they were all men. And so I don't know if anybody was there in the 60s, but as far back as we've checked so far, she's the only woman who's been Hamilton County Auditor. And she's been just wonderful in that position, just working hard with us. You know, the property tax issue is a big one. And, you know, as she likes to remind us, you know, it's not the county that sets the taxes, it's the state. But you know, we fuss at the people from the county. So it's the state that sets the taxes. But she's worked really hard with us in trying to help people who are struggling paying property taxes. And so I just really appreciate her so much. And we wanted her to know now how much we love her and appreciate her. And the fact that she got her start right here just makes me so proud. So thank you for having us. Anna Albee.
Thank you all for doing this tonight, and thank you for allowing us to speak. I'm lucky enough that I had Bridget Kelly as my state rep when I live in Madisonville, and it was before the redistricting. And I remember she would show up to our Madisonville Community Council meeting, answer questions. I was serving as the lead for Moms Demand Action, and we would set up calls, and she'd rearrange her schedule to meet with us. And just as her constituent, I remember thinking like, man, that is a public servant. She's accessible, she's knowledgeable, she's empathetic, she's answering our questions. And now being elected myself, I aspire to reach that level. Bridget was actually one of the first people I talked to when I was thinking about running for office. I remember a story she told me about when she was out knocking doors. She knocked on some resident's door and their stairs was all beat up. So the whole conversation was about, I can't get these stairs fixed, I need help, And Bridget made some phone calls. And sure enough, she got those stairs fixed. And next time she knocked on that door, that resident remembered her and was so grateful. And Bridget said to me, that's what it's all about. And I just truly appreciate that. And I appreciate her service to this community. It's the small and the big things. I'm just so grateful for everything she's done. And thank you all for doing this tonight.
Thank you.
Right, moving on to consideration of the resolution. What is your pleasure? Mr. Curtin.
Make a motion that we read the resolution and pass it as written.
Suspend the rules and have all three readings with the first reading in its entirety?
I would like to do that.
All right. Second,
I second.
seconded by Mrs. Franzen. Motion is to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the resolution with the first reading in its entirety. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Girton.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have the first reading of the resolution in its entirety and then the other two readings.
Resolution honoring Bridget Kelly. Whereas it is fitting that the City Council of Norwood pay tribute to those exceptional citizens who have distinguished themselves through their impeccable service to the citizens of our great city. And whereas the City Council of Norwood recognizes March as Women's History Month and wishes to recognize a daughter of our city whose life has been dedicated to public service. Excuse me. And where, sorry, I'm having, whereas, I'm gonna have to take a second. Sorry. Do you want to read it? Sorry.
Why don't you do second and third?
Okay.
All right. Whereas it is fitting that the City Council of Norwood pay tribute to those exceptional citizens who have distinguished themselves through the impeccable service to the citizens of our great city. And whereas the City Council of Norwood recognizes March as Women's History Month and wishes to recognize a daughter of our city whose life has been dedicated to public service. And whereas Bridget Kelly comes from a long family tradition of public service, her grandfather, R. Edward Tepe, having served as mayor of Norwood from 1948 until 1957, and her father, Robert G. Kelly, having served as a member of City Council, then City Auditor, then City Law Director from 1980 through 1995. And whereas Bridget Kelly was born and raised in Norwood, receiving formal education at Gressley School, Holy Trinity Grade School, St. Ursula Academy, a bachelor's degree at Xavier University in 2005, and a master's degree at the University of Cincinnati in 2010. And whereas Bridget Kelly served the citizens of Norwood as a member of the City Council for a term from 2006 through 2007, and whereas Bridget Kelly represented Norwood as a member of the Ohio House of Representatives for 3 terms from 2017 through 2022, and whereas Bridget Kelly served the citizens of Hamilton County as auditor in 2023 and 2024, and whereas Bridget Kelly always makes the color green look good, and whereas the Cincinnati Enquirer wrote that Bridget Kelly has built a reputation as one of the most genuine, well-meaning civil politicians in the Ohio State House, July 27, 2021, and whereas Bridget Kelly sponsored a bill that ended sales tax on feminine hygiene products, which passed 84-1 in a highly partisan Ohio State House. And whereas Bridget Kelly is widely known as a leader who conducts herself with kindness, perseverance, and most importantly, integrity, enriching the lives of those fortunate enough to know and work with her, now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Norwood, State of Ohio, that we hereby honor the outstanding career of public service by the Honorable Bridget Kelly and declare our gratitude for her service to our great city.
Resolution honoring Bridget Kelly. Resolution honoring Bridget Kelly.
What's your pleasure? Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to pass the resolution.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the resolution. Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Gurdon.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on with the agenda, special presentations. Mr. Skelly.
Thanks. Council, good evening. Members of the audience, good evening. For tonight, I'll be presenting, as you can see, the Community Development Department. For those who don't know me, my name is Mike Skelly, and basically I head up this department for close to the last 3 years. I don't see Chief McCabe here, but I'd like to thank him for his presentation last month, particularly since he kind of broached the whole topic about master planning. So in some cases, it did add a little bit to my presentation tonight, but it flushed out nicely in terms of what I do for the city and what I hope I continue to can provide that service. Basically, for the last 25 years, the city has had an intermittent experience with economic development, community development. I believe in those 25 years, there's been 3 people that have done similar work that I've done in terms of the type of duties and responsibilities. So moving on to what is community development. The best way to look at it, it's a bit of a jack of all trades. It comes down to 4 key tasks. The first one is kind of the biggest one, the most typical, is dealing with the operations side. So that's basically site plan approval, permitting, a lot of building related aspects. The next would be policy development, capital infrastructure issues. And as you heard from Chief McCabe last month, it sometimes ties in with where is the municipality going, where is the population trending, what do we need to look for in the future, how does it impact our infrastructure and key services. A third big one is economic development. Now, in this case, I don't bring a lot of expertise in that, but the city's fortunate enough to have Alloy Development, specifically Catherine Fitzgerald, assist with that for the city. And then lastly, administration organizational development is a component. It's more of a more modern element where planners bring to that additional skills with regards to looking at the overall organization, capacity building, and providing for coordination amongst different departments as it relates to land development. The key thing with regards to, and as you see, land is right in the center. That's because community development, community planning does revolve about land development. So typically, we look at land as something to build on, to grow. However, there's definitely the component, it's a finite resource. We have to look at protecting it and what's the best way to use it. Typically, you heard the adage that once you build on it, it's gone. It's basically a lot more expensive to redo it, and sometimes with various sites like brownfields, it's very expensive to redevelop. So continuing on that theme, and as it applies to master planning, it's really important to have this document to know where you want to go, how do you want to get there, how do you want to carry out the various tasks to organize future work. A plan is not easy. So a plan is not easy and can involve obviously conflicting perceptions, what to do, and priorities. So I kind of used this slide to kind of show, essentially, you heard a lot sometimes, we want to strive for finding an appropriate place to live, work, and play. We have different beliefs in terms of where we are with our family, but these are the typical things. It's primarily building roads, building our homes. But again, you can see the little character for Dr. Seuss, the Lorax. Again, it's also about how do we protect the environment, the natural resources, and what can we do to do a good job up front initially. And again, if we do all this correctly, we hope that we get recognition and we get awards for doing such things. But again, having the plan is critical to get us there. There we go. So the main thing of the presentation tonight is provide a little bit of background about, again, we're all interested in budget. That was the discussion of the subcommittee before. And in my case, it's really me. It's a single person. I provided an advisory function, service oriented to both direct reporting to the mayor and the safety service director. And as I mentioned, we have a contract with Alloy Development for helping us out with things like CRAs, TI, in terms of doing what can we bring to the city in terms of also grants, et cetera. What I bring to the city is being familiar with local government, its different roles and responsibilities, and helping, again, the various departments how to best use that, and again, most importantly, the land. But quite simply, in our case, for community development for the city right now, the budget, it's about $153,000. 59% of that is primarily for salary, benefits, FICA, all related kind of payroll. And then we have about 23% provided for the supplemental obligations for Alloy, and then also at least a couple of programs with Hamilton County. So moving on to key accomplishments. One of the things really with regards to what I do for the community development department, it comes to having meetings, making contacts with different people, different organizations, and expanding relationships. So again, going back to land as a development, land as growth, the key thing is meeting with the developers, builders, and trying to marshal developments through the development process. Obviously, everyone's familiar with Factory 52. There's been other smaller ones, the dispensary, and there's several ones that are in the pipeline that hopefully in the coming months you'll be more familiar with. But again, it extends to having formal meetings for the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then obviously the Planning Commission in terms of looking at whether it's new policies, updating our zoning ordinance, et cetera. So moving on to goals for the community development and then myself as well. Essentially, when I was hired, a key thing, and especially for a city like Norwood, is looking at our tax base. How can we expand it? How can we generate more revenues to pay for various things, infrastructure and various services? So again, trying to help the developers, the builders going through the process to at least make them understand what's necessary, what's the best way to approach it, and what's needed. But a bigger issue sometimes is just providing that background education as to both outside people and inside as to what are the long-term impacts of making these various land use decisions. How does it impact the physical development? How does it impact in terms of operational budgets, various projects? So at least for me, I hope to continue on providing that advice and more importantly, providing best management practices from other municipalities, both in terms of public administration, customer service, and responsiveness. So one of the key topics, at least for tonight, returning again to land, in this case is development. What you see in front of you is around 8 or so, I would say, larger properties that we have right now that may be considered either underutilized for the city. So these properties amount to around 35 acres. And when you take that and divide it by the 2,016 acres for the entire city, it results in about 1.7%. And to me, returning to the question of our tax base, how do we grow it, 1.7% is not a lot to rely on. So the question is, what do we do? So for Norwood, and I guess for most cases of the urban municipality, there's really a couple options, and that's about it. You can either go up, or we have to look at sites for redevelopment. And I use this particular slide for a property over the Rhine. Again, I'm a newcomer to Cincinnati, but apparently this used to be the site for the former Empire Theater. That property, through neglect and some other issues, was demolished in 2000. And in 2002, over the Rhine, it was a secondary plan developed for that entire area, and it prompted property owners and various people to get on board as to what was going to be done. In this case, I think they were originally looking at, the plan was trying to recommend that it be restored and some sort of similar social function. Now, unfortunately, around 2022-23, with what was happening economically, trying to find developers, a developers group picked up this property in addition to 6 others. And what I like about it is that, fine, a plan's important. It shouldn't be rigid, but you have to look at the time and the circumstances. But they were able to still take a viable idea, come up with a traditional mixed-use development, ground floor retail, and then actually they provided for affordable housing on the upper stories, and that was leveraged through, again, partly the master plan that they had prepared and what fit for that area at the time. So to me, this represented a good idea of how the master plan was used. Now, I provided this slide essentially to give you another example, which is something where in situations, and again, this is not Norwood, it's not Cincinnati, but in situations where you have the land value being in excess of the actual building, you have probably heard about McMansions, monster homes, teardowns. That is very typical, and that will, I'm saying, indicating it will absolutely occur in Norwood, but it could occur. It's occurring in other large municipalities when you see that. And sometimes if you have zoning policies, other things where, for better or for worse, they're maybe not as restrictive, you could have situations like this, where a developer will try to come in and make use of more flexible zoning, or, again, bring it to a BZA and ask for certain relief. But I think most people would agree this would be considered incompatible with most neighborhoods, and if you were the person on the right, obviously you wouldn't appreciate that. Now, to give you a better example, so this is from the community of Mount Lookout. It's about 2.5 miles southeast of here. And in that case, you had a single family home located on a 1.43 acre site. And what the developer was able to do in 2018 was subdivide that into 5 lots, which had homes of equal or slightly larger size, and include an actual private road, cul-de-sac, so fire trucks could get in and out conveniently. And in this case, it worked out. Now, you look at the picture, you say, well, what happened to the landscaping or whatever? Again, it's always a give and take, but I don't know people who caught the news today, but they were talking about that, at least from a recent report, there was only around a third of Cincinnati neighborhoods that were providing for the new growth since 2010 to 2020. So again, when I talked about for our urban municipality, what can we do? It's really redevelopment, infill, or going up. And really those are the solutions that we have to look at, approaching it. But again, returning to the needs for why do we plan? Why do we need a master plan? It's all trying to flush out those important issues, whether it's forecasting population, what do we need in terms of revenues, and how do we want to grow? So this is my last slide. And again, I just would like to harp a bit. Again, it's really in terms, I can do my job effectively, having a better sense as to what council, what the mayor wishes. But so far, I'm happy to be involved in the zoning, dealing with major developments. It's always fun. The short-term rentals, the food trucks, a lot of those with the policy decisions I enjoy as well. And I continue, it's important.
Make sure you hit the Smiths. Put the Smiths instead of snooze.
That's twice.
It's okay. I take the hint. So again, it's the last slide. So, and then lastly, again, most of it we're attending the bike design, pedestrian design workshop last month in February. So there's a lot of important things that we can do, and the various departments in the city have benefits to a master plan for various different elements. So that's about it. I won't hopefully pester you for one more little tune to interrupt, but at this point, thank you for listening, and if you have any questions or comments, please let me know.
Any questions for Mr. Skelly? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, request to address council. So we have 7 total. One of the things that we changed in the rules of council this year was to allow request to address council on agenda items to be considered prior or to be heard prior to the consideration of that item on the agenda. So there are 2 requests to address council on 9 non-agenda items. There are 5 requests to address council on the ordinance pertaining to modifying Victory Park status. For those 5 individuals, do you want to speak prior to the consideration of that item, or did you want to speak during the general request to address council? You have that option.
Now's good.
Okay. All right. Then I will go in the order that these were received. So we will start with Bishop Sonny James. Bishop Sonny James.
Mine was to just address council.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I may have fallen asleep. I just left a wonderful meal with Focus Cincinnati and Charlene Myers. I just came today because, first of all, this is a wonderful time to come because there's acknowledgments and celebrations. And so I want to keep it, that's wrong.
I know. Look, you don't talk that fast.
You know, the clock was generated. So I want to keep in step with that. And one thing that I have to acknowledge before I even get started is Ms. Royce did something today that I think really shows people, not just locally, but in other communities, when I saw her begin to speak, and she just couldn't anymore, I thought to myself, wow. So many times, and so often, myself included, we get so caught up on the programmatic stuff. And we lose sight sometimes on the things that really matter. And so when you have somebody elected to an office, but above their duty to serve the people, they serve the people by being real people with a real heart. And when I saw her in tears, I tried to maintain my little bit of macho-ness and kind of scratch my eyes so no one would see. And I just want to say to the city of Norwood, we've come a mighty long way, and we still have some hills to climb. But when we can just put our agendas to the side, we can do amazing things. And not to put him on the spot, I didn't get his permission to mention this, but I'm going to just speak the truth. Relationships have mended here in our community to the point where we can do major things together. I remember Mr. Braden and I standing across the street from each other and probably not treating each other the way we should. And now to see that, I look forward to seeing his face. I look forward to embracing him. Charlene Myers and I just had a situation, and we went to a community dinner, and someone made a mistake in the bathroom. And because, obviously, I'm black, and the individual may have been of the same hue, I had to be questioned, something that was done in the bathroom. But let me tell you something. This awesome woman, most people look at me and say, oh, that's a bear. But this awesome woman sent me a long message afterwards and said, Bishop, I'm sorry. I never should have done that. I never should have assumed anything. And like Ms. Royce, my heart melted. I started thinking to myself, wow, what an example. And so we flooded her meal today to the point she came in and she said, Bishop, man, we have a ton of people. I said, I'm sorry if I brought too many. I'm closing. But I just want to say this. We have many things to celebrate. But one of the best things that we have to celebrate is us. If we can keep coming together, and as we now begin our new initiative, no longer celebrating Black History Month, although we will celebrate Black History Month, but coming together and allowing people with different cultures to celebrate their culture every month. And I encourage you, just like Focus Cincinnati, man, that food was downright good. I ain't seen people chow down chicken like that in all my life. I had to tell some of them, slow down, come on now. If we can keep moving forward, and as we roll out our new gun initiative to focus and work on these young folks that are out here really, really running amok, I encourage you, when you hear of initiatives, when you hear of great things happening, come to the fold. Let's celebrate together. And I'm going to start with me. As James Bonsall can admit, things haven't always been rosy and peachy. But if we can just look past a lot of our past, what can we do together moving forward and making a way for those children that are really looking up to each and every one of us? I'm surprised President of Council hasn't looked at that clock yet.
I got three of them.
I just want to say in closing, to God be the glory of how far we've come, our police department, our fire department, and each and every one of you. And keep moving us forward. It makes the world of difference. I beat the clock.
Thank you.
All right.
Charlene Myers.
So actually, I do want to point out I am dressed in green today, even though I didn't know that was the thing. I was an accidental, but I am a little dressed down today because we were serving a meal in Finneytown for Holy Trinity St. Nicholas Church, which is our sister church here in Norwood. And as you know, we serve 2 meals, one there and one at Christ the Savior. Our next meal is April 11th. We invite you all to come. We actually had WCPO at Finneytown and hoping to repeat that here in Norwood. To have a little press of some good community food and good community relations. And as Bishop James often talks about, feeding ourselves, but feeding our souls, because we think that's important. So again, if you want to come out, as I understand it, he promised me, Chief McCabe is coming out with some firefighters. He, I guess, had an issue, something with North College Hill, don't get it, but okay.
Oh dear.
Probably shouldn't have said that. So anyway, he's promised me he's coming out to the April 11th meeting, community meal. So again, invite you all, and thank you, Bishop James, for all the kind words and allowing us to kind of move forward in our relationship. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is Tom Cantwell.
Good evening, Council. I'm Tom Cantwell. I live over on 2032 Maple Avenue, right around the corner. I'd really like to just thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. First, I would like to say that me and my family, we only moved to Norwood about 2 years ago, and we've thoroughly enjoyed our time here, and we're glad that we've chosen to make it our home. We're excited to continue to be part of this community and to raise our 4 children here. This is my first time attending a council meeting in Norwood, and I hope to attend more in the future. I've personally always tried to involve myself with my local community and have done so in the past, so I'm honored to address you all here tonight. The reason I am here is to state that I do have a concern that the attempt to modify Victory Park's status in regards to 561. I know that previously council had chosen to remove Victory Park from the ordinance to allow for time to have a dialogue with veterans groups, and I hope council will share their findings, and I'm sure they have. As someone who has not heard those findings, though, I am concerned that this topic is not being given the amount of time and concern for the veterans that do live in Norwood and make up an important part of our community. According to the last 2022 census, there are 846 veterans in the city of Norwood with roughly 19,000 total residents. That means about 4.5% of Norwood's population are veterans. That may seem fractional, but in Norwood's percentage of veterans lines up with the national average with a nominal veteran population. It's important to take that into account when considering some of the other troubling statistics in regards to veterans. According to the VA, 10% of veterans between the ages of 18 and 25 and 5% of those above 25 reported alcohol abuse. This is even more alarming when you consider that a recent study from the National Center for PTSD reported that 30% of all veteran suicides were preceded by frequent abuse of alcohol. These are extremely difficult statistics to reconcile with, and my goal is to really just to make sure the council is fully aware that they do have a very tough decision to make, and that there are members of our community who may be negatively impacted by this ordinance change. I would also like to add that this matter is somewhat personal to me, as my father, who served in the 101st Airborne Division, he came out with numerous substance abuse issues, with alcoholism being the primary one. He's fully recovered at this point, and we'd be first to tell you that no one is to blame but himself, and he takes complete responsibility for his actions, and changing this ordinance will not shift the blame of substance abuse away from the individual. But I still believe we can do our best to serve our community by continuing to provide a safe space that they can go to without being surrounded by the very thing they're trying to avoid. Yes, I currently know that the park is not a particular safe place on a daily basis. The park is misused all the time by individuals who are violating open container laws and using drugs in an egregious manner. Creating environments and events for the community is one of the best ways to drive out the nonsense. But with that said, I personally love to have a good time with friends, sharing drinks. I love to drink beers with friends during the summer, enjoy a glass of whiskey on my front porch, but I also believe it's possible to have a good time without alcohol. And I understand that Victory Park is a tricky situation since it's the centerpiece of our town and a perfect location for events where people are gonna want to have a good time. A flourishing community like ours needs spaces like this, but those spaces do not necessarily require alcohol. Although it's not perfect, Victory Park is a symbol for our honoring Norwood's rich history of military veterans. I spoke to several other residents who have suggested some form of separation between the east and west side of the park to allow for alcohol while preserving the more reverent space. There are other mitigation tactics that can be used to prevent harm and maintain a certain amount of reverence for the park, such as restricting the sales of alcohol and establishing designated perimeters, or even just to continue to allow alcohol to be served and consumed on mills during special events. Some of these ideas honestly sound fantastic, and they may provide a happy medium. But as it stands right now, though, that is not the case, and I believe that currently changing Victory Park's status would be a short-sighted mistake that would do more harm to the community than it would do good. Victory Park is not a normal park and deserves to be treated as such. Before Victory Park's status is changed, council should consult with Veterans Affairs organizations and make a concerted effort to make sure that Victory Park will always be a place where veterans feel honored, respected, and safe. This may mean creating a special circumstance and rules within the ordinances for Victory Park instead of just changing its status so that it's not treated like any of the other parks within the city. I hope that council will take what I've said into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next request to address council is Ricky Paul.
My name is Ricky Paul. I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Norwood. I live at 2320 Lyle Lane. I am an honorably discharged veteran of the United States Navy in 1979. As I stand here today, I'm the commander of the American Legion Post, Leon M. Barnett Post 123. And we oppose any alcohol there. I speak for those members. We don't want any alcohol to be drank in Victory Park. You know, there's a wall up there and those names are enshrined on there. That's their resting place. They're gone, but their voices will be heard. They don't want drinking in the park. They want you to come there. I've seen about sectioning off the park. Well, we'll just do a little part. We shouldn't talk about sectioning off the park. We should be talking about expanding the park to Vietnam, to Afghanistan, to the Iraq wars. I mean, we have a lot of veterans from there that should be up there. Having drinking in the park is not the answer. There's not the answer that we have. At one time, Norwood had drinking in the park. I don't know, I'm looking around the room, I don't see very many people that would have been here at the time in the 80s. It was summer days. It became a drunk fest. They urinated by the memorials, they puked, people got ran over by cars, there were multiple arrests of assault and disorderly conduct. And the same thing's gonna happen. The same thing is gonna happen. I say we expand the park to include more veterans rather than discourage the veterans from coming to the park. And those members that are on the wall, they enlisted in the service. They went to make a difference, to make the world a better place, to make the United States a better place. Now it's your time to shine in the city of Norwood, to make it a better place, to do the right thing. If you're Norwood strong, if you're Norwood first, if you're Norwood together, then do the right thing. Do the right thing and vote no on this ordinance. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next request to address council is Rick Hirsch.
Thank you for your time. My name is Rick Hirsch. I live on Quadman Avenue. I'm a representative, one of the co-chairmen of the Victory Park Veterans Association. The association came about as a result of events in the parks, and we've been working for decades to improve the quality of the park with the city of Norwood and with the support of the previous mayors. Mayor Hochbein helped with the installation of the tank. Mayor Williams helped with the MIA POW monument. the Victory Park Veterans Association, we are against segregating or separating the park. We are against having alcohol in the park. We, as Mr. Paul said, we see the need to improve the park, increase the park, have more memorials in the park, and we would look forward to having conversations with people in that regard. To this day, we've not had a conversation with anybody, so to answer questions, so we look forward to the opportunity. So hopefully you guys will set aside this ordinance, move on to other business, and start from scratch. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next request to address council is Dave Bentz.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak here this evening. Like I said, my name's Dave Benz. I was born in Norwood, Ohio in 1949. I'm not proud of that, but I'm still here. Anyway, but I moved out a few years ago because I needed a one-floor plan. I have great neighbors out there, but they're not Norwood neighbors. They're special folks here. Now, I've appeared here once or twice before on this same issue. I'm told by the Norwood Business and Professional Women's president this evening that they will not seek any alcohol permits for Victory Park for their Norwood Day, which I applaud. But that does not stop another organization from asking for it. Mayor Tom Williams guaranteed us that there would be no alcohol in the park. Vic Schneider said that he would not support having alcohol in the park. I was a little disappointed, elated and disappointed, but he did not sign the last ordinance. This time, I hope he vetoes it should you choose to pass it. Nothing has changed my opinion. I think it's an affront to the veterans who have those bricks and who have their names on that wall up there. There was a couple of other points that I wanted to make, but they escape me now. Regardless, I really hope that you folks do the right thing. I've had conversations with some of you, and I think I know where you stand. I think anyone who's associated in any way, shape, or form with that cidery up there, I think they should abstain from voting on this issue. I think that's only the right thing to do. Now, I don't know where this is going to go. I have a feeling you've made your minds up, which is terribly disappointing. But support your veterans. We supported you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next request to address council is John Atwood.
I'm John Atwood. I know lots of you. I live at 2219 Madison Avenue. I also am a building and business owner here on Montgomery Road. I realize you guys have a tough decision coming. Well, I hope it's a tough decision for you guys because I know an active, vibrant park is going to do great things for Norwood. And some people have different looks on how it can get there. We just heard a great thing from Mr. Paul, maybe expand the park with more veteran World War II, things like that. And I think that sounds like a good idea. But also I know that having parties, I can see the vision, putting up a bandstand or putting up a pavilion, having anything up there would be a really cool way to activate the park. But we also have to look at precedents that's already been set and agreements that we've heard about before. I was trying to figure out the words I wanted to say, and I usually don't write things down, but because I'm standing up here, I'm going to read what I wrote down a little bit so I don't mess it up. But I saw two words when I was looking at it, and they were dishonor and disgrace. Dishonor is failure to observe or respect an agreement or principle. Now, a principle doesn't mean something's written down. It doesn't mean that something is like written in stone, but it's there. And I think that's where we're kind of at right now, where there's been a principle where the money's been spent, time's been spent, tears, joy, all that's been spent in the park with the veterans, and that's their place. Now, I know that it'd be cool to have a great place there. I think that their ideas of expanding the park with more memorial stuff would be ideal for everybody to be happy, because it can be a gathering place for many people, not just from Norwood, but people could come and see that as well. But city council's main role is to deal with financial stuff, right? You do financial business, and financially speaking, having a place to activate the park and have businesses come there and do things, that would make some financial sense. But sometimes we have to deal with people business too. And I think that's where we're at this point, is where we have to separate what's going to be good financially sometimes and what's going to be good for the people. I live my life through my faith. And 1 Corinthians 10:23 says, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. And sometimes what sounds good to us, what we might think is right, what we might think is the best idea, isn't right for everybody. And I find that hard sometimes myself to put aside what I want. But I think this is a time where, as a business owner on Montgomery Road who would benefit from having big parties and having people spreading and being right there, I can still say I don't support it, because the precedence is already set. Now, I did see recently that Paycor just gave us a bunch of money, and that we denoted maybe $250,000 or something to the biking and things, which I support the biking and stuff too. But maybe we can look at some of that money and denote it to other things if it's not done yet, to helping expand the park with the veterans and things like that. So there's solutions somewhere. You can't ever make everybody happy, but you can be honorable and don't dishonor the people who have taken care of us for years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to next items on the agenda, we have in reports of standing committees of council. That is an infrastructure, streets, parks, recreation, and public places meeting.
Thank you. To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Infrastructure, Streets, Parks, Recreation, and Public Places, to whom was referred Waterworks proposal for maintenance, capital improvement plans, and sources of funding for improvements, and resident concerns about streets, beg leave to submit the following report. We heard from Jeff Bloom of Cincinnati Pool Management about his company's proposal for maintaining the pool at Waterworks Park and recommended that council accept the contract. We also discussed events at our parks, including Victory, upcoming capital improvements in the parks, street repaving projects, and resident concerns about the city's infrastructure. Respectfully submitted, Miss Emily Franzen, Mrs. Sam Bowling, Miss Alexis Royce, and Mrs. Candace Winterbauer.
Thank you. It's your pleasure. Mr. Braden.
A motion that we accept the committee report.
Motion by Mr. Braden to accept the report.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Garten. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is a second reading of ordinances and resolutions. This is a resolution supporting the placement of a historic marker at the base of Norwood Mound in acknowledgement of its historical significance and supporting a request for grant funds for that marker. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Hoover.
I move that we have the second reading of the ordinance.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover to hear the second reading of the ordinance. Mr. Braden.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have the second reading of the ordinance. Sorry, the resolution.
Resolution supporting the placement of a historic marker at the base of Norwood Mound in acknowledgement of its historical significance and supporting a request for grant funds for that marker.
Thank you. Introductory readings of ordinances and resolution. First is an ordinance amending Chapter 723 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Home Sales and renaming Chapter 723 as Yard Sales as amended. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Hoover.
Motion that we have the first reading of the ordinance.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover to have the first reading of the ordinance. Mrs. Winterbauer.
I second.
Seconded by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any discussion? Mrs. Hoover.
I just wanted to share the changes that were made for those of it at home. Is there a way to get it back up on the screen, Mr. President? A couple things. First, we just changed the name from home sales to yard sales because that just was confusing for folks. We have made it so that the dates will be permanent, so people won't have to keep asking, when is that happening? And it will be the second weekend of September and the second weekend in May. The other change was we added for the option of Sunday sales. We will be putting it on the city website so people can do it online. And we also have added a please donate unwanted items and usable items to a donation center near you to encourage reduce, reuse, recycle. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowling.
I also want to point out that we removed the length of time that residents have lived in Norwood from the application for a yard sale permit.
Any other discussion? All right, motion on the floor is to have the first reading. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have the first reading of the ordinance.
An ordinance amending Chapter 723 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Home Sales and renaming Chapter 723 as Yard Sales as amended.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, an ordinance amending Chapter 561 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Parks and Playgrounds to expand and clarify alcohol permits and to modify Victory Park's status. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Franzen.
I move we have the first reading.
All right. Motion by Mrs. Franzen to
No
have the
discussion.
first reading. Is there a second? Mrs. Winterbauer.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any discussion? Mrs. Franzen.
I figured we'd, make a motion so we could have a discussion because, So, I'd like to hear from Mr. Gabbard. I don't know if you have any comment about this or you don't have to come up, but I know you originally requested this ordinance change for the parks in general. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Mr. Gabbard.
So this all came about as we were giving out permits. Once we resurrected recreation, we started doing permits for the shelters like we've done for 100 years. We discovered that there was only 2 parks that had that you could have alcohol at, and a lot of people, when they have their parties, it's their own party. If they want to have it, that's what they're requesting. So we checked with the law department and found out, what the deal was, and so we brought it to Parks and Recreation Committee just to throw it out there, just say, hey, look, can we make this to where any shelter that we reserve, if somebody wants to have that, you can have alcohol there. Now, that being said, you have to have a permit to have alcohol in a park. And if you're caught just hanging out at the shelter, or you want to have an impromptu party at the shelter, then you can be fined by the police and be ticketed for open container because you don't have a permit. The other thing is when it comes to Victory Park, this is not on us as recreation. We just administer the permits. We have to have an ordinance to be able to have the guidelines on how we administer permits. So if you all want to say nothing in Victory Park, nothing in Marsh Park, nothing, that's fine. We just need guidance on how to proceed with issuing permits and what those, what you're allowed in each of those. The permits have gone up because, people like to have those outdoor events, but that's kind of where it all came from. It all started with just making sure we had clarification, and it makes it easier to just have it across the board. But if you want to eliminate any park or specific area, just put it in the ordinance, and then that way we can then proceed accordingly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Always a statesman.
Other discussion?
Yeah, I want to.
Mr. Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to read a piece of the actual ordinance, just so we're clear, because Mr. Atwood talked about having big parties at Victory Park, and I agree. I don't want big drunk fest parties either. And so I want to be clear about what the ordinance actually states. No person shall have in his possession an open container of any alcoholic beverage in a city park and/or playground, except that alcoholic beverages shall be permitted in designated picnic areas with a permit from the Norwood Rec Director for authorized use of such designated picnic area, subject to reasonable conditions as the Recreation Director shall prescribe. This ordinance would only allow a small amount of alcohol in a reserved space. It is not allowed to be an open container carry. This is not a DORA. This isn't taking alcohol from Speedway or the cidery into the park. It is if you apply to get a permit to rent the gazebo, you can have alcohol in the gazebo. And for instance, this would, if we did Christmastown in Norwood, and the firefighters wanted to do their fundraiser, they could not do that according to this ordinance without some kind of special extra permission. I want to see Victory Park used correctly. And currently, if you go there, there is constantly drugs and alcohol there. And so I don't know that this ordinance does anything to prevent what's already happening there, other than to bring people who are respectable, law-abiding citizens to the park. I'm confused about that. And also, to address another comment, I have personally taken my time to go listen to veterans, and I've gotten mixed reviews. I've heard people on both sides of it. I will also say, after one of those, I will never take my daughter on city council business again because of how disrespectfully I was treated in front of her. And that really disappointed me, because I went in good faith to listen, and now this public service has made this town unsafe for my daughter and I. I mean, not unsafe, but like it was difficult for her. On the other hand, I'm thinking about Bridget Kelly in 84-1 and her time to make peace and come to consensus. So I'm okay with this as the first reading, and I will double down and listen to more voices. But if anything, I want to hear a solution to get rid of the problem in the park. And so far, nobody has addressed that. Nobody has said of anything that will stop what's currently happening. And so that's my biggest concern. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mrs. Hoover?
I'd like to share that I have thought about this quite a bit, and I've talked with a lot of people. Probably like most people in this room, I have family members and dear loved ones who are veterans. And I would like to say to folks here that disagreeing is not disrespect. Maybe that's the first thing I'd like to say. I think that we can have difficult conversations about difficult topics without it being considered disrespect. I would also like to say that one of the main things I'm hearing is that the issue is drunkenness more so than drinking. And drunkenness continues to be illegal. I had an opportunity to talk to Chief Sumner and very specifically about whether he believes this will create an issue in the park, the permit. He does not. He does not think that that will create a bigger problem. Right now, they are patrolling, the park, I believe, about 6 times a day. The other thing that feels like this is I'm trying to think of the correct word, but the fact that if I get a permit, my name is on that, and now I am a responsible party, and I think that that also adds another layer to people being responsible and respectable at the park. Another thing that I'm thinking is that I like the mayor, when I travel, I'm always looking at how do other communities manage their public spaces. And one of the things that I have seen in the most vibrant parks are where parks are multi-layered. This past weekend, I was in Decatur, Georgia, which it's not small town, a little like Norwood, but they have a really beautiful park in the center. And they have a memorial for fallen police officers or officers. There's also like an Emmy who died in the line of service. And they have a beautiful memorial. They have beautiful plantings. They have a flag. And then over here, there's a family playing soccer. And over here is a family picnicking. And over here is the huge gazebo where they have concerts in the park. And for me, I believe that while the park honors our veterans, it is also our city's sort of our front yard. And that we need to be really mindful about how we utilize that space and how can we make it a space that's inclusive for everyone. And for me, I'm not seeing that alcohol allowed in the park in these permitted spaces. I don't see that impacts someone's ability to go to the memorial area and experience that. I would also like to have ongoing conversations. I did try to reach out to Mr. Bentz, but I had the wrong number, so I apologize for that. I think that, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think when we are looking at reimagining these parks, and when I say reimagining, we're going to need to do, we're going to need to get new play stuff. We're going to need to be doing work in these parks, that we have conversations that include all the voices and make sure that we can, sort of with the Venn diagram, how many people can we include in those spaces? So those are just some of the things that I've been thinking about. I do want to say that this is something that at least I have taken a great amount of time thinking about and talking to lots of people about. And I don't think that it's going to be, it's going to continue to be a difficult conversation, but one that I'm very open to having with anyone. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mrs. Bowling.
Yeah, so, I also come from a family with quite a few veterans, which I'm very proud of. And in my time working at the cidery, where I should state for the record, I no longer work. That has been brought up on social media many times. I am not affiliated with or employed by the cidery in any way any longer. The park, in my opinion, would serve to honor the veterans most by being used and being celebrated and having families there and having activities there. And currently, you know, what I saw being across the street from the park for a year plus was not that. And I think that anything that we can do as a city to encourage people to utilize the space and to go there and to read the names and to celebrate the history is really beneficial to the memorial. I think there's a way to go about it that is respectful and that also serves the needs that people are requesting for our parks and for our recreation structures. I agree with Mrs. Hoover. I don't think this is going to be an easy decision, and I don't think we're going to resolve this in one evening. I think it's important to listen to everyone and all of the feedback that we're getting. But I think currently what's happening in the park is not respectful of the memorial. It's not reflective of our community and our feelings about the veterans, and it's not proper use of the park. So what I would like to see is for us to get more community programming, get more private permitted events, whatever we can do to activate that park as much as possible, because it has been shown over and over and over again that activating the space is the way to discourage inappropriate behavior in the space. So anything we can do to get more activations happening there so that we can use that space and celebrate those veterans.
Thank you. Mrs. Franzen.
All right. Okay. I was kind of torn between just doing the introductory reading or just doing all of them tonight. I'm so tired. I don't look at Facebook that much anymore, but I hear about stuff, and people have been saying all sorts of interesting things. The idea that having a beer garden in the street adjacent to the memorial is fine, but having a beer garden the same distance away from the memorial in the grass, not fine, blows my mind. I am frustrated by the idea that having a memorial in the park means that the memorial part is the only thing that can ever happen there. I would be astonished if any of the folks in the city or in this audience go to the memorial besides on Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and walk around and look at the memorial stuff. It's not a church. It is not a cemetery. It is not some sacred space. It is a place where people do drugs, drink, and unfortunately disrespect the veterans that way. There was a pool there for years. Was that disrespectful to veterans? There is a playground there and swings. Is that disrespectful to veterans that people use that? I don't understand the idea that having permitted usage of special events in a park somehow disrespects veterans, that the Legion, where as far as I know they do sell alcohol, does not want alcohol anywhere near veterans. I'm just so frustrated. I'm just so frustrated. And people, I want this park to be a beautiful place where people can come and enjoy it with their families and not feel like they're going to be in the middle of a drug deal. And the way that we do that is having more events and more people there and more things that draw people there that are not just there to do harm. That's it. It doesn't need alcohol.
Order, please, in council chambers. Thank you.
We don't. Sorry, I'm just going to try to formulate my thoughts a little more. I believe Mr. Gurton may have some stuff.
Mr. Gurton.
For what it's worth, I've spoken to Mr. Bintz at a previous committee meeting. Mr. Hirsch and Mr. Paul, I'd be happy to sit down and talk with you guys personally to hear more of your perspective and to talk this out. Absolutely. And I will take it upon myself to reach out to you. And anybody else is welcome to message me, to contact me through city council email. Well, I'm happy to listen to more and to take more perspective in, and I hear your voices tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Ms. Royce?
Just a point of clarification on some of the signs I'm seeing, which they're awesome, they look nice. Free speech is cool. This does not lower the drinking age or permit children to drink alcohol. I just want to say that based on some of the things I'm reading. I don't want any misinformation. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that. Appreciate the robust discussion. You know, I just wanted to make a few points. My father is a Marine, Semper Fi. God rest his soul. My grandfather was a Navy veteran. God rest his soul. Several cousins, Purple Heart cousins, that have battled and injured in wars. At least one uncle with a Purple Heart. So, I mean, my only point is, as long as there is one veteran that shows up here that has an issue with their memorial, I think that's what we should stand on. So that's my point. When one person.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Franzen?
Having family-friendly events in the park is great. Having alcohol doesn't make it not family-friendly. If we go to breweries, there's families there. We have a lovely family-friendly event, Christmas Town. There's alcohol there in the parking lot. We have veterans memorial parks throughout the country where they have events. The Blue Ash Veterans Memorial up in their park, they have events with alcohol there. There is a Veterans Memorial Park out east in Anderson Township. They have events with alcohol there. It is still very strange that having a Veterans Memorial on a piece of land means that you cannot drink alcohol anywhere on that piece of land, even if it's not on the memorial. The lawn is a separate place. That's where you can reserve it. The gazebo is a separate place. You can reserve it. Part of why I wanted to do this ordinance was so that you can't drink in the memorial part. This park was not made just as a memorial. The fact that there was a pool and a playground and swings there is if it was just a memorial, there would not have been a pool or swings or playground or anything there. So that's my point.
Mrs. Bowling?
I would just like to address the audience. Everyone here on council and on city administration very respectfully listened to everyone who came and spoke. And so we just request that you respectfully listen as we speak as well. We do follow an order in council chambers, and speaking over each other is incredibly disrespectful. Thank you.
Mrs. Hoover?
I would also like to say to those in the audience, all of our emails are on the website. My cell phone is on my business cards. I'm available 24/7. If conversations need to happen, now's not the time for conversations. Now is the time for council to do our work. And if you'd like to have conversations, let's do that, but not during council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mrs. Franzen?
I also want to put it out there. I don't work for the cidery either. I work for Xavier. I'm an entomologist.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is to have the first reading of the ordinance. The roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
No.
With all members present voting, 6 yes, 1 no, the motion carries. Please have the first reading of the ordinance.
An ordinance amending Chapter 561 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Parks and Playgrounds to expand and clarify alcohol permits and to modify Victory Park status.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Winterbauer.
Motion to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the ordinance. Mrs. Hoover.
I second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Gerton.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mrs. Winterbauer.
I move we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to pass the ordinance. Is there a second? Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Mr. Garden.
I did a little question asking, and for what it's worth, this money is moving from one key to another, and it's basically to work on the pool contract. So the majority of this is all invested in the pool.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Gerton.
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next item is an ordinance amending Section 505.15 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Prohibited Animals to modify the rules regarding keeping chickens. What's your pleasure? Mrs. Bowling.
I move we have the first reading.
Motion by Mrs. Bowling to have the first reading of the ordinance. Is there a second? Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Mrs. Hoover.
Yes, I just wanted to bring people up to date with what this is doing, and my apologies for not having it already highlighted. The main thing is we are increasing from 7 chickens to 10. You're welcome, Mr. Atwood. I'm looking forward to eggs. That we continue to not allow roosters. The other thing that we are changing is the process, which apologies, I'm trying to find it on here. Mr. Moore? We've changed the way the fee structure works.
Section 3.b.
Can you read it aloud?
I will have.
Is that allowed, Mr. President?
I don't mean to be out of order, Mr. President,
Bowling.
but I will, thank you. I will happily read. We are changing the permitting and inspection process. Previously, it was $25, question? Yes?
A year.
A year, and there was an annual inspection. We did some digging and realized that many other municipalities near us were handling that a little bit differently. And so we changed that to a $150 permit fee, and it will not expire. There will be one initial inspection to issue that permit, and there will no longer be annual inspections or permit fees.
Thank you. Mrs. Hoover.
And just to add on to that, that's the health department, the Board of Health still has the ability to inspect at any time.
Mrs. Bowling.
Also, I'm just going to read this out loud. The permit fee shall be reduced to $25 for holders of an existing annual permit issued before April 1st, 2024. So that just means if you currently have a chicken permit, you will not be required to pay that $150 chicken permit. That's great. You will not be required to pay that $150 permit fee, just one final $25 fee.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Garden.
What's the $150 for?
Mrs. Hoover.
That would be the permit fee. So that allows for when Mr. Shelby does the inspections, it usually takes him about an hour to an hour and a half. So that pays for his time, the administrative. This was never intended to be a money grab for the city, but we were actually losing quite a bit of money if we're charging $25 for a fee that then takes an hour and a half to do an inspection with his driving there, walking around, that sort of thing. So we have front-loaded it, and then you never, you don't have to pay another time.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is to have the first reading. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
No.
Mr. Braid?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes.
Little consideration.
6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. Please have the first reading of the ordinance.
An ordinance amending Section 505.15 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Prohibited Animals to modify the rules regarding keeping chickens.
Thank you. Next item is a resolution honoring Women's History Month and authorizing the mayor or his designee to sign the Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls Pay Equity Commitment and declaring an emergency. What's your pleasure? Ms. Royce.
I vote we suspend the rules and have all 3 readings.
Motion by Ms. Royce to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the resolution. Is there a second? Mrs. Bowling.
A second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Mrs. Hoover.
I just wanted to read something I got from Annalise Cahill. She's one of the members of the committee. She wasn't able to be here this evening, but she says, as a member of the Pay Equity Committee of the Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls, thank you for joining as a signee on the Pay Equity Commitment. That will be if we sign. The commitment serves as a guiding document for businesses, municipalities, and more to support their women employees. You will be joining the City of Cincinnati along with this year's signees, the Village of St. Bernard, the City of Forest Park, and the City of Cheviot as leaders in Hamilton County. We also have another 30 businesses signing on. We appreciate your prioritization of gender-based equity in Norwood, and we are here to be partners to you moving forward. Please don't hesitate to read. Okay, and I did want to say that we did share information to all the council members about what this equity is, or the pay equity signature commitment is. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything. It says our intention is to be mindful. We will be passing on information to an HR director when we hire one about paying attention to those sorts of things. The city is not, because most of our employees are civil employees. It's everyone's pay is transparent. So it's not, oh, you make this and you make that. You make the same. So this is more of a sharing our intentionality. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, motion on the floor is to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the resolution. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braid?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all 3 readings of the resolution.
A resolution honoring Women's History Month and authorizing the mayor or his designee to sign the Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls Pay Equity Commitment and declaring an emergency. A resolution honoring Women's History Month and authorizing the mayor or his designee to sign the Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls Pay Equity Commitment and declaring an emergency. A resolution honoring Women's History Month and authorizing the mayor or his designee to sign the Hamilton County Commission on Women and Girls Pay Equity Commitment and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. It's your pleasure. Mrs. Hoover.
I move that we pass the resolution.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover to pass the resolution. Is there a second? Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to administration reports. Mr. Bonzo?
Thank you very much. So we are coming up to our Norwood municipal tax. Excuse me. Thank you. We're coming up to our Norwood municipal tax deadline, which is April 18th this year. Just as a reminder, all residents 18 years and older are required to file. Even if you don't owe anything, like your job's withheld, it's a really easy file at that point. If you have any trouble with it or any issues, just come into the tax department. We'll be happy to help you fill the form out. You can find the form online. Your accountants can also fill it out. They'll charge you a fee probably, so feel free, just like I said, come in and we can help you too. We are going to be sending a mailer out to all residents. It's going to be like a every door mailer, so there's like a huge discount. The school district does this somewhat frequently, but there's a huge discount if you hit every door and not just target it to people. So you'll be getting that. It's our community, our responsibility campaign is what we're calling it. So we're really excited about it. And just to make sure that we're reaching people that probably don't know that, there is a kind of a requirement to file. So really excited about that. So we're ramping up, and we're also just ramping up everything in general in the office. So Tim Wagers was here at the very start. He had to leave, but he just wanted to again remind you all that if you all need anything, like I said, you're welcome to feel free to stop by. We have moved forward as well with the Republic Bank transition. So we're working on right now, like I said, just getting everything out of US Bank. It was very nice, felt very nice to notify them because there have just been so many issues in the past. So it was a big relief, and we're going to work with them through the end of the year to, have everything transitioned. But and then in a few weeks, you'll get your water bill will have the Louisville address on it and not that Cincinnati address for where you mail your water bill. So the reason for that is, again, just the bank that we currently have. They have a lockbox service that's not in the city. It's just in suburban Hamilton County. The bank that we're going to with much, much less fees, their lockbox service is in Louisville. So, it's really just, we're sending it to one bank instead of the other bank. So you'll be seeing that. So if you have any questions from residents, just kind of know that if you have a question about that, Mrs. Hoover.
Right.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. My question is, should we be encouraging folks to mail their payments in a few days earlier then, since it's a little further down?
Mr. Bonzo?
Yeah, I know, that's a great question. So we've actually had we've been working with the water department, the city administration on this. We're actually implementing improvements into the process, whereas today there is significant delays with the current provider and the current way that the water department goes through it. Whereas there's going to be some automation that's actually going to, even though it might take a couple of extra days for it to get to the city wasn't actually receiving those payments. It's going to be right at the same time. We're actually cutting a couple days off the process for what currently happens in the water department. So yes, people should get those in as soon as possible. We've informed the city administration about the due dates, do those need adjusted? They've evaluated those and haven't come up with any recommendations on adjusting them. But I actually think there's going to be potentially, it's going to be better than it was when it comes to other improvements for how the water department actually processes them with this new banking provider that will kind of negate the extra mailing time.
Mrs. Hoover?
Thank you, sir. My other question is, when we do online payments, I'm aware that there's a sizable fee. Will that be changing with the new bank, or is that a separate system because that's like the online payment system?
Mr. Bonzo?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and that is not changing as a direct result of the banking switch. So it's the city administration that kind of picks that provider. I'm not aware of that fee changing. So yeah, I don't have any information on that.
Thank you.
So another thing to note too that Tim, we wanted to make sure that we shared is that we've been working with the city departments for the past couple of months on credit card fees. And currently right now the city eats, anytime you pay with a credit card at the building department, even the tax department, not the water department, but some of the other departments, the health department, the city eats a lot of credit card fees. And it's, when you count the cost of the boxes, like the actual boxes cost money in the current providers, the boxes cost money that we process them with. There's these various fees, there's a bunch of fees that go into it. Going forward, we're going to be moving to a provider called Bridge Payment that is, for everybody but recreation, there's going to be a fee now when you use, there will be a fee starting April 1st when you use your credit card at the various departments. So this is something that the city administration, like everybody, has been given the option. Do you want to do this? Do you not? Do you want to eat the fees? And everybody has chosen that, it's not fair to residents that are paying with checks or paying with cash to have to eat the fees for the credit cards. So basically what we're doing now is that we're reducing the fees to the city by not having, the new provider we're going to is charging a flat 3.5% fee for credit card transactions, but no other administrative fees, no other box fees, no other fees at all, which is going to be a much better deal for the city compared to what we're paying for right now. So that fee is going to just then get passed on to residents that pay with a credit card at various city offices. So that's recreation is the one, again, every city office has the option of how they wanted to do this. Recreation is the one exception because a lot of times it's like kids and stuff that have like credit cards from their parents. Recreation is going to continue to eat those fees, but just wanted you all to know that that is coming, and there will be some kind of a letter or something that's going to be sent out shortly about that. So, yeah. The mayor here, he could probably answer questions about the other city departments, but just wanted you all to know kind of what people had decided on that. So.
Thank you. Mr. Moore. All right.
Oh, and I did see Mr. Powers here. So I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here. So you could probably talk to him too if you had questions about anything.
All right. Moving on to unfinished business. Mrs. Hoover.
Sorry, I wasn't prepared. I felt like that came up really fast this time. I do have a slide to share.
But I can't show it because the thing was closed down and.
Well, I'm very disappointed. I'm sharing this on behalf of Alexis Royce and the DEI Advisory Board. The donation drive for Lydia's House, which is transitional housing in Norwood. We are having a donation drive. There are donation boxes at City Hall, the rec, and that's it.
There's a bin shortage.
There's a bin shortage, so those are the two places, and you don't need to go anywhere else. But there's a very specific list of what they would like, and we encourage you to look at that list, and we'd love for you to add to our pile. I saw some things when I came in. Let's see, sorry, unfinished. That's all I have for unfinished. Thank you, sir.
Any other unfinished business? Ms. Royce.
I just wanted to correct myself because I was mistaken last meeting when I said that the 2021 council was the first woman majority. It was a series of tragic miscommunications that led to me thinking that. So, and I obviously don't want to erase women's history during Women's History Month. There was for sure a woman majority in 1999, I believe. So, don't want to erase our foremothers here. And I'm sorry I misunderstood that. And shout out to those ladies.
Thank you. Any other unfinished business? Any new business? Mr. Burton.
I'd like to make sure that the Committee of the Whole has an agenda item to talk about the FRP.
All right, so you would like to place FRP into Committee of the Whole?
Mr. President, may I please place the FRP into the Committee of the Whole?
Yes. Any other new business? Mrs. Hoover.
Along those same lines, sir, I'd like to add a community survey and a standard operating procedures for council into the Committee of the Whole.
All right.
And I believe that there was another item. Did we cover the one that you wanted?
The standard operating
That was the
procedure
one?
was.
All right,
yes.
thank you, sir. And then I had no. All right. I had a couple other quick things. One is I want to give a huge thank you to Councilwoman Franzen, Mike Skelly, Darren Hackworth. This last week, there were, we put in some congressionally directed funding applications. What that is every year, the Congress gets to pick projects from their communities. If you recall, one that Mrs. Franzen put in for 2024 was the Millcrest Connector. No, I'm sorry, the Millcrest Loop. Too many words. We were not selected for that, but I spoke with the chief of staff and said that was actually a really good application, but unfortunately because of timing, we can't put it in again, because if we got it, we wouldn't have the money before we're going to be done with the project. Does that make sense? So we worked tirelessly, Mrs. Franzen and Mr. Skelly worked really hard to do a couple other these are big $1 million projects that we are making applications for. For years, Norwood hasn't done that. We kind of we circled the wagons and we were just trying to keep the lights on. Now that we're getting more on our feet, these are things that we really need to put attention to. It's very frustrating because what I would love to do is say we need $5 million for the roads. Guess what? That's not how it works. They're very, very specific. Do you want to do this little project? Do you want to do this little project? So we have to look through a lot of information and try to find projects that are going to be competitive and that are going to have a good story and that have a chance of getting funded. So I appreciate the frustration a lot of people have probably of like, we just need money, get the money and put it on the streets. It doesn't work that way. The money that we're trying to get goes to separate projects, and then that can loosen up funds to put into the streets. So also, Mr. Skelly found a grant kind of last minute, and he whipped it out. That was for the 250th anniversary of the state of Ohio, a grant. So we're doing a lot. We're doing a lot of work in between meetings, trying to get as many resources as possible for Norwood, and I just want folks to know that. That being said, I would also like to get a housing meeting on the calendar for the beginning of April for my housing folks. Maybe throw out days and times.
I'm not available until third week, but
Of April?
But if you have a quorum,
I think we will wait for you. Mr. Braden? Is there a day or time of day?
Yeah, just pick one.
Okay. And then who's my other housing person? So we've got a council meeting on Tuesday, the 23rd. Could we meet before then?
Sure.
6 or 6:30? Is there a different time difference that makes a difference for folks?
Mrs. Winterbauer.
The finance committee is meeting at 6:30 on the 23rd.
Then never mind. What about Wednesday, the 24th?
Works for me.
Okay. 6:30?
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, we'll say 6:30 on Wednesday, the 24th. Thank you, sir.
And that is in council chambers.
Yes, sir.
Any other new business? Mrs. Boland.
I'd like to place new council member orientation in committee of the whole, which I meant to do last council meeting.
Noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Royce.
I had read the resolution supporting Mrs. Kelly, but I wasn't prepared to be clerk pro temp tonight. So I apologize for not being able to finish it. But she deserved that, but it was too much for me because she's a great lady. And I just wanted to, I didn't want it to seem like I was unprepared and didn't realize what was in the resolution. It was very hard to read. And thank you, Mr. Gears, for finishing that for me.
Any other new business? Just one, I guess I should have mentioned this under unfinished business. A reminder, carry over from committee of the whole meeting for council to send me your top 3 priorities. I don't know that I have received any yet, and committee of the whole isn't, I know. Committee of the whole is next Tuesday.
Working on.
Mrs. Hoover?
Only 3?
If you want to send more, that is fine.
Thank you, sir.
Mrs. Bowling.
On that note, we did clarify that roads were a
Assumed.
given, and so roads should not be included in your 3.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Any other new business? All right, moving on to communications. The community development report from Mr. Skelly that has already been presented. If someone wants to make a motion to receive and file as if read. Mrs. Franzen.
I move that we receive and file as if read.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to receive and file the report as if read. Is there a second? Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Gerton.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next, communication is a letter from the Safety Service Director regarding a request for executive session. She has to read the letter first.
Oh, sorry. I just said I'm pro tip.
It should be, yeah.
Office of the Safety Service Director, request for executive session under Ohio Revised Code 121.22G1. Dear Council President Gears, I request a motion to enter executive session at the March 26th meeting of the Norwood City Council under Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22G1 to consider the appointment, employment, and compensation of a public employee or official. Signed, sincerely, Noah Powers.
Thank you. Mr. Braden.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Do I have to make a motion, or do we receive and file the letter first?
Motion to receive and file the letter and enter executive session.
Motion to receive and file the letter and enter an executive session to consider the appointment of employment and compensation of a public employee or official.
Yes. Is there a second? Mr. Gerton.
Will said, and I second.
Thank you, sir.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Braden, seconded by Mr. Garten, is to receive and file the letter and to enter into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, and compensation of a public employee or official. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Gerton.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. At this point, council will enter executive session, so we ask that everyone who is not an elected official to please exit council chambers, and we will resume at the conclusion of executive session. We have no absent members. Moving on to adjournment. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to adjourn, please.
Motion by Mr. Braden to adjourn. Is there a second? Mr. Gerton.
Second the motion.
Second by Mr. Gerton. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Mrs. Bowling.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Gerton.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. This meeting is hereby adjourned.